This evening's class, grid down cooking. You know, I sometimes think of it, for most people, it's like life after the microwave, but all the other things that we use all the time. And this is tools class, the 8101. So where does this class fit in the scheme of self-reliance? Well, we always look at the number of classes. There are a lot of things to learn, and I don't teach everything, and no one person can. But in the tools class, and we've done several of them, you see where it fits in there. The mission is to reach and teach, and it's all about principles and helping people understand that preparedness needs to be based on principles. If you just base it on lists of things, what you do is you find out that you don't know how and why things work. The 9 core preparedness modules, this is in the tools area, but foundation principles, clothing, water, sanitation, nutrition, shelter, wellness, tools, and supplies. Everything you need to know, do, and have for life in general is contained within them. Basic foundation principle for somebody that may be brand new, the law of provident living, is the most important one of all, I believe, and it's in this order of priority from spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and stuff, and it has to be in that order. If you try to go from the bottom up, it doesn't work. The law of stewardship is the reason that we're probably here together. It is about the authority, the responsibility, and the accountability in life. And again, this is not about emergencies. This is about life in general. The law of the parachute fits in very well because, well, parachute, you have to have it before you need it, and it better be a good one. That's exactly the way it is with your attitude, knowledge, skills, and then the material things and supplies that you have, because once a disaster has occurred, it has no responsibility for your well-being. That's all yours. These 8 laws are some of the foundational ones that I wrote for myself years ago. We talk about a few of them here very briefly, but if you want to learn more about them, there is an online class, Foundation Class 1001. That is available free online at safeharboralliance.com. Just go to the website, open up the webcasts, pull down the past broadcasts, and you will see 9 of them there. The kind of the overview class to each one of these 9 areas to get you pointed in the right direction. Those are there. It's free, and you can go back again and again and send people there. Also, there is a 2-hour principle-based DVD that you can get through Safe Harbor. We sell that one inexpensively so people can get it. Those are 2 sources for some of these foundational principles. Well, as I mentioned before, we're talking about tools. This is Tools Class 8101. And we have this wonderful infrastructure that brings all kinds of services to us, electricity, communication, water, and those things. But if they fade away, if the grid is down, the electric grid, communication grid, the transportation grid, they're all tied together, what are you going to do? So that's why we talk about grid down cooking. Well, cooking is an important tool to help you with some of your nutritional needs. One is taste. Some foods, frankly, just taste better when they're cooked. It's also about safety, which is about destroying pathogens and or toxins. Some foods, and some foods that people eat all the time, some parts of the world, they must be cooked, or they are in fact toxic. However, foods of any place can become contaminated, and we want to kill the pathogens that may be in there. It is about variety, because you can get kind of tired of eating the same old uncooked thing. You take and you cook it, and that'll help with appetite fatigue. And then it is also about nutrition, because in some cases there are some nutrient properties that are only released when certain foods are cooked. So any one of those reasons may be the reason why we cook foods at various times. Sources of heat for our cooking, well, we have both natural and man-made. Solar energy burns some of the natural fuels you find around, or we have a lot of man-made fuels that can be used for the heat source. This is the way it is for most people in America, is it not? You turn the tap, the water's there, you flip the switch, you can see. The pantry is always stocked. When you run low, you go to the store. You turn on the burners and things get hot. You dump the scraps down the disposal. The dishwasher cleans it all up, and life in this country is great. And as a matter of fact, it is. And I enjoy the lifestyle. But can you guarantee that those things will always be there? I don't believe you can. That's why we make provisions for the future. Now, before you can start cooking, there's some other things you have to take care of first. They have to be in play. One of them is water, and that's why we talk about water storage and purification. You must be taking care of that because water is usually an important part of cooking. Sanitation, this hidden disaster, and it is about keeping things cleaned up and being able to wash surfaces and areas that you work in, food contact surfaces so they don't become contaminated, and then the different utensils and things that you may in fact be using is an important part of sanitation. Also nutrition before you start, well, you've got to have the things you need, so we talk about storing food. Well, that's vital, because if you don't have foods in storage, then when something goes wrong, you're just a victim. And now you're hoping that somebody will come along and save your hiney. So we put things in store, things that may be convenient, that may be expedient, but we also have the long-term and the basic things, and many of these things, of course, can be a part of producing new food, which is also a part of provident living. And we need to have a means to replenish those things, so some of the tools of learning that you gain the information you need from, and then the tools so that you can grow, and then you have to have a way of preserving some of these foods so you can use them in the future, and a variety of ways of doing those. Those are all a part of some of the things you have to think about when we talk about cooking. Another one is shelter. There is great value in coming inside, particularly when you have heavy winds going out there and rain and sleet, because it's really tough to cook anything in a blizzard. So whether you live in a house or apartment, if you can get inside, and we'll be talking about some of the things you can do there, but if you need to be mobile, again, mobile shelters can be very useful because being out of wind and out of weather allows you to have fires and cook. So each one of these different shelters has provisions made so that you could do some cooking inside of it. Wellness is another one that fits into this you have to think about, and here we're talking about first aid. Since you might be chopping and cutting, well, you might cut into you, being able to take care of those issues. But one of the biggest one in safety, since we'll be using things perhaps most people don't use, and that's about fire. And I cannot overemphasize how important it is to both be very conscious of that, but also be prepared to stop it before it spreads. Some of the supplies, and this gets a little closer to what we're doing, because these supplies that we consume and use, and in this case we're talking about fuels. Now there's a fuels class, but just in quick review, we have different kinds of liquid fuels, you have solid fuels, and you have gaseous fuels, all of which can be used. So we have this collection of fuels that will also determine the kind of appliance that we must be using. See, you want to have options. I don't believe that you should have just one fuel or one kind of appliance to use that fuel in. You need to have all of them as far as I'm concerned, because being single source or limited to just one or two, what do you do when you run out, when something breaks? You want backup to back up your backup that backs up the backup that you had. You'd never cross-mix fuels in appliances. When I'm talking about there, if you have an appliance that's designed for kerosene, you put gasoline in it, that's called an IED. That's called I can't even remember what that stands for now. It's anyway, IED is what it is. Anyway, it's a bomb. Let's put it that way.
Explosive device.
Yeah, it's all right. It is an explosive.
Explosive device.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. Because gasoline in the wrong appliance is extremely dangerous, is extremely deadly. You're making a bomb when you do that. You must have knowledge about how and why these things work. And knowledge, if you'll remember that formula, K equals I times E. I'm giving you information. You need experience. So you practice now. You break things now. You make mistakes now. You learn to do some of these things in the dark. You learn to do them by braille. You develop the memory and the habit of how to do some of these things safely and easily, so that when it's stressful, you're not going to be shut down. You have to know how to safely transfer fuels. Because if you do this wrong, you have a problem. We talk about that in the fuels class, the proper way to do that. And there's a lot of things you can do that I would recommend you don't normally do, but when you have no choice, you've got to be able to do it safely. How do you take propane out of a large bottle, put it into a small one? Which ones can you fill? Which ones must you not even consider filling? You need to know how to do those things properly so that you can have storage of fuel perhaps in large containers, but you can't always use it in those large containers. There are some minor fuels to think a little bit about the trioxane, the hexamine, wax, vegetable oils. These are useful, but they're fairly limited when it comes down to cooking because there's not a lot of heat energy in them, and they can be quite pricey. But you can, in fact, work with them, including even the olive oil. Will do a little bit of cooking, and the reason we know that it'll do that, and I'll tell you that it can, because that's the only thing that the Eskimo had. Now, he didn't have olive oil. He had whale blubber. He had seal oil, and he used seal oil lamps for a little bit of lighting and a little bit of cooking. That's what they did, in fact, use. But it's a difficult one. It's harder to work with than some of our wonderful man-made fuels.
Very expensive.
You do need to learn about fuels, about the safety, about the benefits, the hazards, and the limits of each one of them. Fuels Class 9101, or Supplies Class 9101, is all about fuels that you'll want to be considering. Fire starting, if you're going to be using a fuel, you have to know how to get it going. And you absolutely must know that you can, in fact, do that. And there's a variety of ways of starting fires. Most of us will just simply use a match. But please remember, as I remind people, matches age. Temperature, humidity, and oxygen cause them to age. And if you've had matches that have been setting out kind of in the open, or they're not properly sealed up and they're 5 years old, you better get some out and be checking them. Depends on humidity and temperature. They may not light very well at all. So if you store them properly, they'll of course last longer. So there is a Tools Class 8103 that will help you understand about the different ways of making fires. Now, when we talk about tools in this area in particular, we're talking about tools related to cooking. Well, first off, there's some tools that are kind of support function tools. They'll provide access to the foods, pre-processing, for repairs, and for safety. How about a can opener? If you have a lot of things in cans, you better have several can openers. Of course, I always carry one with me on my knife. But lid lifters for those buckets and bung wrenches to get into your water in barrels and things, you want to know that you have those. You probably want to have a backup. And then have an option. What do you do if you lose those things? What if you don't have them for some reason? You need to understand how you can always get into these containers without destroying something. Other kinds of support tools would include things that would allow you to grind, crush, flake different grains and legumes, things like that. A little electricity would be nice so that you can run blenders and electric mills, because that's a heck of a lot faster and easier to be able to do it that way. These are support tools. And then you have the pots and pans and a variety of different things that will allow you to cook and prepare and produce your foods. Now, the tools for cooking the foods themselves. Here again, as we think about cooking, it's about the taste and safety and variety and nutrition is the reason we may need to cook. So there's a number of them, some of them that would run on liquid fuels, some of them that run on solid fuels, others that run on gaseous fuels, and then there's some other tools that we'll consider that will help you save energy to extend the use of those very, very precious fuels. So there's a variety of them. Know a little bit about each one of them, and you're going to need to decide which of those you want to have. And as I said, I believe you should have several of these kinds of appliances and tools in each one of these categories so that you always have a backup. If you were just planning on, I'm going to do everything with propane because it's such a wonderful fuel, when you can no longer get propane, what are you going to do? Those propane appliances, you can't do anything else with them. So your backup is what you must do. Liquid fuel appliances, and those of you that attended our fuels class will remember that some of these fuels can be used inside safely. Others must never be used inside. They're very dangerous to use inside. So the ones that you must never use inside is any of the gasoline, white gas, the motor fuels, any of those, never, never inside. That is only outside. Kerosene can be used inside safely. It's kind of smelly, but it's a nice one. The best and most convenient to use inside, of course, will be propane, but when you run out of propane, you need the backups is what it comes down to. A kerosene stove, a single burner kerosene stove, can be a very nice way to go. They are safe to run inside with all of the standard provisions of you are consuming oxygen, you are giving off carbon dioxide. You don't give off much carbon monoxide with kerosene, but you do get a little bit of noxious fumes and smell with it. And kerosene's kind of ugly to handle because once you spill it, you never get rid of it, is the bottom line. But it does a very nice job with, I'll say, your standard pots. Now, it is a little bit more sooty than some of your other fuels, and so you will get some blackening of your pots. particularly when your wick isn't trimmed properly, when you're not running that stove right. When you're running that stove right, it produces very little soot. Now, notice I said very little, because there is some that's coming out, but not a whole lot. You run it wrong and it turns everything black in a hurry. If you need a larger cook station of kerosene, they make kerosene ranges. These are used around the world. So if you want a 4-burner with an oven, you can have one of those too if you felt that kerosene was going to be your fuel of choice and you could get more of it. Another liquid fuel to use safely inside is the alcohol fuels. This is a small 1-burner alcohol stove. That's the burner itself right in the center. You simply pour the alcohol into the center of that and light it. It's very much like the olive oil that we talk about in the light class, that it's quite safe and you can light it directly. And now, the alcohol does not have a lot of energy in it. It has about 80% of what gasoline has in it. So it's very useful to have a windshield around it and a pot that will nest down inside of that to get the efficiency up. And this particular pot that I'm using has aluminum on the outside and stainless on the inside. Quick question.
Yes. Rubbing alcohol, or do you have to buy denatured alcohol? Where do you buy it?
Okay, the alcohol, and that's in the fuels classes. The urethanol alcohol is the best, the grain alcohol. You can use the rubbing alcohols, but they don't have as much energy in them because they have more water in them than your denatured alcohol will have. And the other thing is the isopropyl alcohol puts off more ketones, esters, and aldehydes than your ethyl alcohol does. So you really prefer the grain alcohol as the safer one to use over the isopropyl. However, isopropyl is acceptable indoors also. So this little 1-burner stove will do a very nice job of producing of being able to boil water and cook things in it, but it is a small stove. The other liquid fuel, of course, is going to be the gasoline-based ones, and you have the Coleman-type fuels, the stove and lantern fuels, and then you have gasoline that motor fuel. Now, if you'll remember, those of you that attended our fuel class, I will remind you again, I never want to use voluntarily the gasoline in my white gas stoves. Even though they're now rated to handle it better because they've changed the generators, that generator, see that yellow arrow points over to that little tube that goes over the burner? That's the thing that fails on you. It fails faster when you put in motor fuel than when you put in the naphtha or the white gas or the stove fuel. So my preference is I will always have in storage the white gas. When you run out of white gas, you have no other option. I will then switch to the gasolines, but I also recognize that my stove will not last as long, is the bottom line. These are pump-up type of stoves. That allows them to work, I'll say, in much wider variety of temperatures and conditions. You can have them in the small backpacking form, which is a very common one that I use and many people use. They're very lightweight, very compact. They put out a lot of BTUs. But the big thing about the gasoline-based, the white gas fuel, is these will work very well in the cold and the extreme cold. The other fuels, it's difficult to get them going, and in some cases, when it gets cold enough, you just about can never get them lit. I've been able to run white gas stoves at 30, 40, and 50 below zero. Now, they get a little cantankerous at those temperatures, and if you understand the tricks about getting them going, you certainly can. But if you have kerosene, it's just about impossible. Propane will not work colder than 30 below zero. It will not run. And alcohol is a difficult one to get started in the very colder temperatures. So the pressurized white gas stoves will work the best in the extreme cold, and that's why we use them when we're out in the snow. You have the solid fuel appliances. And the solid fuels are the most available fuel all around the world. In fact, it's what most people cook with. We're talking about biomass, as it's sometimes called. Well, you have coal, and if you're going to burn coal, you have to be sure that you have the right appliance for that. A wood-burning stove that's for wood, don't burn coal in it because it will not hold up. It'll destroy it. So you want to be sure that you have the right kind of stove and appliance if you're going to be using coal. Now, all coal stoves will, in fact, burn wood just fine. But if it's a wood-burning stove and it isn't prepared with fire brick and or cast iron linings inside, it will burn out with the coal. The coal will destroy it over time. You can have wood-burning appliances, and even if it isn't designed with a cooktop on it, well, you can still do some cooking inside on the coals with Dutch ovens and things like that. But it is very nice to have cook surfaces with them. There's some small portable ones, Most of the time they're going to be in kind of the rocket stove design, as you see a couple of them here. There's a lot of these coming out on the market, and there's some pretty clever designs that people are coming up with now. And the rocket stove is one where the fuel is fed in from the side. If you look at that one down on the bottom there, the orange one, it's fed in from the side, air is drawn in there, and it goes up through the combustion chamber. It allows it to get really hot in that combustion chamber. You get more efficient burn, less emissions, and you use less fuel. Here's one of these rocket stoves that I found out on the internet that's made out of, well, steel pipe. That's a rugged little thing right there. You could drop it from a plane at 30,000 feet and it probably wouldn't hurt it. It's probably also not very light, but it would be very durable. You could build one yourself. As a matter of fact, we've built them for years. Here's a rocket stove that I have used. When I saw this one come available, I immediately got one. I've played with it. It works very nicely, and the cost was very modest. Fuel fed in from the side, and you can see the sticks there. And you're just burning off the ends of them in there. You just keep shoving the ends in so you can control your burn, and it will give you, it'll give you a good cook with a very modest amount of fuel. And you can burn other things in them too. You know, corn cobs, any kind of biomass will work fine. It is designed for sticks and twigs and split up lumber. You can build your own. We've done this for years using the number 10 cans and tomato juice cans and things like that. So a little bit of skill and some junk, you make a rocket stove that you feed from the side. You can kind of see the design there. In some other classes I'll go through greater details on building this, but I just want you to know you don't have to buy everything. You can make things. If your stuff gets destroyed, lost, or you're separated from it, as long as you have the knowledge of how to do this and a few tools, you can build one. Now, one of the things to mention about all of these rocket stoves is that inner combustion chamber, that heat riser, it's insulated. In this case, if you look at that bottom right-hand corner there, it's insulated with vermiculite. It could be fiberglass, it could be perlite, it could be a number of things, but it wants to be insulated, so number one, the outer skin stays cool and you can handle it, but also it's to concentrate the heat on the inside so you get an efficient burn. If I had to, I can make emergency stoves out of a 10 can, just a number 10 can, just by punching holes in the side. Those of you that are old enough will remember the thing we used to call a church key, okay? And so that was the can opener that'll punch those things in there. Through the years, there have been more and more of innovations. This is one of the stoves I got a number of years back, 20, 25 years ago. It was coming close to what we now call the gasifier stoves. This was very often called the Jamaica stove. It's drawing in air at the bottom. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, its combustion air comes in there, flows up over the outside of that inner heat riser, so that combustion air is being preheated and then brings it down to the bottom of the chamber and injects it in with your fuel. Gives you a much more efficient burn when you heat things up like that. You can find on the internet designs for stoves that are kind of similar to that. They're called gasifiers. They're not actually true gasifiers, but they come real close to filling the bill. They're very efficient burning little stoves. This is a small one made out of a pint paint can that you can see the plans for out there and instructions on how to build one of those things. There's other commercial ones being built, and they're being used in other countries in particular, in the countries in the Far East and those areas where they have a lot of rice hull and things like that. This one on the right is actually designed to be burning rice hulls. Well, you could be burning corn chaff, you could be burning all kinds of things, and doing it very, very efficiently. The stoves that is quite easy for us to get. It's actually an upgraded model of that green one that I showed you earlier. Comes from the Stove Tech people. They've made improvements to it to make it more durable and to make it a little more user-friendly. I still have my old one, which, by the way, costs less than half of what the new ones do because it's a little more primitive. As I showed you before, you feed the sticks in from the side. But what I like about this particular stove, this model, it's a two-door model. Because not only is it a standard rocket stove, but now we can convert it into a very efficient charcoal burner. And in this case, in that upper door, we're going to remove the stick support, and then there's an insulated plug that will go in there, that we install the insulated plug, and then there's a door that closes over that so you can shut it, and then you'll see the door down below that we're going to open. That's going to give us combustion air that'll come in under the charcoal briquettes, and then you can drop your charcoal briquettes in from the top, but you can control the combustion air with that bottom door down there to kind of throttle it a little bit. When you look down inside of this, the thing that's very important is you'll see that cast iron grate in there. If you don't have cast iron, the charcoal will burn it up. Steel, mild steel, will be destroyed by the charcoal. So this has a cast iron grate in it, as well as the top plate is cast iron. And I found that if I'll have about 4 charcoal briquettes, that's adequate for cooking. Just get them lit, and they run very efficiently and very nicely. And you can put any pot on top of it, such as my little Dutch oven. However, the problem with a Dutch oven that has legs on it like this is it's now up actually too high for efficiency. You would like to have a pot that doesn't have the legs on it, so it'll fit down a little closer. The height of those little ears that stand up on there is to give you the most efficient use of the heat that comes out of there. You have other charcoal devices that we're more familiar with, such as the good old charcoal grills. That's nice for grilling, but it's not the most efficient way to use your charcoal. You lose an awful lot of heat to the outside. A better device would be this thing, the original Volcano, not for grilling, but where I put my Dutch oven down inside of it. You can control the air to the charcoal briquettes. You use far fewer briquettes, and then with the windshield that goes around the top, you get a much more efficient cook. So here again, you're always looking for ways to use your fuels the most efficiently. I can also burn other biomass in that. I can burn sticks and twigs and wood, scrap lumber and things like that. Keep in mind that charcoal is never to be used inside. It must be vented. If you want to have a solid fuel burning device inside, then you're going to have to move to one of these vented type stoves, these cook stoves. You can have a very contemporary look, such as the one on the left, that will burn both coal, wood, any kind of biomass, or a very large range like that. So these would be a good way to do your cooking and heating at the same time. Gaseous fuel appliances. Now, this is the safe, and I put safe in quotes on that because it's relatively safe in terms of the fumes that come off of it. But like any fuel that's used inside of a house, it has its own hazards, and you must pay attention to that. Keep in mind, as we said before, white gas is never inside. Kerosene is great, it's acceptable, but the propane and butane would be the best to use inside, whether it's for lighting or if it's for cooking. You can have a single burner little stove that screws onto the top of some of these little green bottles that are so common. There's also stoves where that screws into the side of them, because that's a little nicer way to do it. You have these small little countertop ones that have the fuel bottle off to the side. Now they happen to be butane in this case. Those are really nice because the center of gravity is much lower. You see that pot is down low versus the one that's standing up on top of the pot. The advantage of the one on the left is they're really, really inexpensive. Those green fuel bottles, when I teach you how to do it properly, you can in fact refill them. Those red butane bottles can never be refilled. So each one has its advantage and disadvantage, and those little butane fuel bottles are quite pricey, is the bottom line. So each one has its advantage. I have several of every one of these things, and we periodically break them out to do some cooking or something when the power goes out and the stove's not working. We get to practice regularly down in our area because our power is somewhat unreliable. I consider that a good thing because it means my utility bill goes down every time it's off for half a day or so. You have your outside grills that run on these bottles of propane, but they're not good to bring inside. They're kind of messy. The best way that you can use one of them, if you want to be cooking other things, would be to put a Dutch oven inside of it, throttle it back, and use it as an oven for your Dutch oven to cook your stews and breads and different things like that. For inside use, you can use the propane-powered, such as this Camp Chef, and use it inside. And here again, keep in mind ventilation, keep in mind carbon dioxide. You don't get a lot of carbon monoxide. It's safe to use, just as natural gas stoves are safe to use. But one little provision I would like you to understand that I haven't seen anybody else talk about is these things put a lot of heat out the bottom. And if you're going to be putting them on a countertop and you have a pot on top of it, there's a lot of reflected heat that goes down. It will get hot enough to damage your countertop. So I will put things like a cookie sheet down underneath it to help dissipate that heat. And if I was going to be using it a great deal on a countertop such as this, I would also have a little insulation underneath it, just such as a towel folded up, something along that line. You, of course, may find these attached to RVs or interior to the range camp I've talked about, where it has both the wood-burning stove and the propane stove. And, of course, you can install in your house if you have, and a lot of people have this where they run on propane. They already have a propane stove, a propane range, and nothing changes in their life when the utilities go out. They just, as long as you have propane in the tank, you can keep cooking. However, you'll probably want to think about conserving it if it's not going to be coming back real soon. It is extremely important in any of these areas that you get experience with the things that you have now. It'll also help you understand why you might want to add some other things in. You want to make your mistakes now while it's easy to fix them and take care of them. So I do this periodically. I've done it through the years. In fact, I'm doing it now. I'll cook in the kitchen with some of my different appliances and just get out all the stuff you might be wanting to cook with. I usually don't have that much out all at once, but it's the idea. Just, fix a meal. Using your backup appliances, whatever they may be. Use all of them. Understand how all of them work. One of the things that you may find in this kind of the support area is that the cast iron cookware is a wonderful thing to use. I'd recommend you get familiar with it and use it. We use it all the time at our house for regular cooking. In fact, those skillets off to the right, that one that's in the middle in that stack is probably about 90 years old, best as we can determine. It's been in the family for a long time. And I have some others that that one was from my wife. And in my own family, we have some that are, they're 80, 90 years old. They've been used for a long time. It's one of their advantages. It's built like an anvil. Of course, it also weighs like an anvil. The beauty of the cast iron like that is, if you look at that in the upper right-hand picture, that cast iron skillet that's kind of in the middle there with the handle pointing to the right, that's the one I use all the time. My wife has one just like it. We tell the difference because mine has a shiny handle. Hers is a little darker. And I use it all the time, and I never have to wash it. It's never washed. Nothing sticks to it because it has a very nice coating of carbon on the inside. That's why they get black. And it never gets, it's never touched with soap. Hot water, yes, sometimes. But I can cook in it, and it works better than Teflon does, at least Teflon that's been used for a little while. Things don't stick to it. So you get them seasoned. That's the old story of seasoning these things and when you use them. The griddles and those things are nice, and we have the waffle iron and all those things in cast iron. The Dutch oven is a wonderful thing. If you don't have one and you don't use one regularly, you need to. It's a tremendous tool for cooking. Now, they come in a variety of sizes you see here. I have from the very small ones up to some big ones, and you can make large meals in them. One of the things you want to be sure and have is one of these lid lifters, and they come in many different designs, so you can pick up that lid. You can also use it to carry them because those handles get hot. Typically, we think of Dutch ovens being used like this, with the charcoal briquettes, stacked, and the pots are stacked up, such as this big feed that we were at here a couple of years ago. Used over top of flames, use them in the coals, and those are great ways to use them. And that's your ultimate backup with this. But the way that you really want to use it the most, and the way I do it all the time, several times a week, I'm cooking in my little survival kitchen. That's out in my garage, you can tell, because there's the air compressor and the welder behind it, a bunch of stuff around it. I'm in the garage. But that's my emergency kitchen. That's my survival kitchen that I'm playing with. I'm gaining experience with it all the time, and I'm learning how to be more efficient in things. Christmas time when we were cooking, and that's just from this last Christmas when the family was there, I just used it as another way of cooking. But I'm experimenting and getting used to the Dutch ovens all the time. You should do this and cooking with them, because one of the things that I found is, as you get experience, you'll learn ways to be very, very efficient with things. And these Dutch ovens on that little propane stove like this, it doesn't take much flame to cook in them. You heat up the pot and then cut it back as low as it will go, and it will cook very well that way. And in fact, if you'll take and put an insulated dome over top of it, it's very miserly on fuel, and I can go for many, many weeks cooking regularly on a bottle of that propane. Well, there's a bunch of classes to teach you about these things. Tools Class 8104, which is about some of these tools and techniques for pre-processing your food during grid down. You don't have electricity. What are you going to do? Cooking with solar energy is another one, 8211, 8212. The rocket stove and using them, in depth, and also how to make them if you need to make one. Dutch oven methods and advantages in 8213, 8214. Open fire cooking. Actually, my favorite way of cooking is on an open fire on a campfire. I enjoy cooking that way. And then different ways of using charcoal in all of its various processes. Saving of fuels is something that's going to be of great concern when you're in a grid down situation. How can I stretch that I have and make it go further? So it is about conservation that becomes critically important to you. Well, one way of doing that is with one of these little devices like this solar oven right here, the sun oven. That's when it was folded up. Here it is opened up, pointed at the sun, and it does a very, very good job. Here it is in a cooking mode when I have things in it, and you'll see the temperature probe that's down there in the lower ref. 228 degrees is the cooking temperature in that particular one. One of the nice things about this particular manufacturer is it has this little leveling tray in there pointed to by that red arrow. So no matter how I tilt this to follow the sun, my pots and pans will stay level in there so I can more readily track the sun. This particular manufacturer, we find that they're very durable. This is a neighbor of mine, lives a little ways away from me. If I remember right, he's had this one, I believe it's more than 15 years. He uses it all the time, and he leaves it outside a great deal. In fact, sometimes he goes out there to kick the snow off of it so he can cook in it in the winter. It's a little bit hammered and beat up. You take a look at the temperature in this one right here, you'll see that it's running at 275 degrees is its cooking temperature. Another way of saving energy is using the pressure cooker. In some other classes we'll talk in greater depth about the pressure cooker itself. You should have several. You should be playing with them and using them now, because just a pressure cooker alone will save energy because you can cook more quickly. But there's another way of using it, and this could be done with a Dutch oven as well as with one of these pressure cookers. I'll take my stuff, bring it to a boil up to pressure, and then put it in what is called the Wonder Box cooker. Its original name is a straw box, because back in the 1880s or so, when they wrote books about this, it was a box full of straw that you put your covered pot in. You brought things to a boil, put it down in this box, covered it up with straw. Well, in this case, it's a bean bag, and these little bean bags that you make with the little styrofoam beads. Put the pot down in there, cover it up, and let it set. Now, don't have a bean bag and don't have a big plastic container to put it in? Well, make one then. It's called an apple box of newspaper. Works almost as well. You always want to have a backup. So I can take that same pressure cooker, bring it to temperature, put it down inside. I'd like to actually have a little larger box, would be better, so I have more insulation around it. Put it down inside, cover it up with a newspaper all the way, put the lid on it, set it aside. Well, one of them's free, the other one will cost you about $35, so if you can't afford the $35, go for the free. What you need is the pressure cooker. Another way of cooking this way would be in the thermos bottles. A lot of people have done this. I've been doing this off and on since the early 70s when we started making some of our breakfast cereals and things this way. These nice stainless steel. The thermos bottles that we have are excellent, but I'd really like to have them with the wide mouth, such as the one at the bottom, so I can get my hand down inside to clean them when it's time to clean them up. You have a larger variety of these. This is considered to be the high-tech straw box, using a very large vacuum bottle. It looks like this. The vacuum container is that thing on the left with the black lid. There's the pot you put on the stove, bring it to a boil, set it down inside. You see it nested down inside. Put the lid on it and then close the insulated lid over top. Let it set. Does a very nice job. There's another one. There are several brands out there. This one actually has two pots that nest inside of each other. So I can put in my large pot. The first one I showed you holds 1 gallon. This one will take almost 1.5 gallons if you fill the one pot all the way. This little second pot that goes in on top, you can have things heated up in it, and so you could have two different dishes cooking away at the same time. I've been comparing these two side by side, doing a little performance testing on them with my temperature probes and all, and the one on the left has done a little better job. It's more efficient. It holds temperature better. I have 2 more that I'll be testing also, and then I can make recommendations about what might be the best one to get. Sometimes, you know, there's a trade-off between cost and performance, those types of things. So when we do a product review, I'll be able to tell you about it. But it's a nice, I'll say, quote-unquote, modern way of doing something that can be done in a wooden box with straw and a covered pot. Thermal recovery is another one of these things to consider in how you would conserve energy, putting this waste heat to use. In most particular, when you have waste heat coming off of lighting. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. One of them with my Aladdin lamp, that's a kerosene lamp that gives me light, using a tomato cage around the outside, above the chimney, having a pot up above it, and then building a heat shield chimney that goes with that. All of this stuff just built at home. Looking down on the top of it, there's the wire that supports the pot. The pot goes inside there. And please notice that there is space around the outside of that cooking pot that's in the middle so the heat can escape out of it. The next thing that I would do that I haven't done yet is I'd simply insulate that heat riser so that I'm losing less heat to the environment and I'm putting it more into my pot. This boils water very nicely, and you can cook your soups and stews or make hot water that way. There's a manufacturer, the Petromax people, that make a multi-fuel lantern. They also make a cook stove that goes on top of their lantern. The same thing, just recover the heat. When you're burning a fuel to make light, you have an awful lot of heat that's being dumped. These things are probably running about 15% efficient in terms of the amount of heat that you have. Only 15% of it goes into light. The rest of it's just making things hot. They're not quite as good as a light bulb that's about 20% efficient. But you can use that heat. Don't let it go to waste. Cook your soup with it. You could do the similar kind of a thing with different kerosene lamps, with your propane lanterns, any one of those, even with a very small kerosene lamp like that little liquid light that's down on the right-hand corner. You can recover the heat off of any one of them with tin snips, pop rivets, and a pair of pliers to bend some wire. One of the other things that's extremely important that you're able to do with all of your cooking devices, these appliances, you've got to learn how to repair them. And you want to practice those things now. You need to make your mistakes now. You break things now. You want to have the spare parts now. You want to learn how to do things in low light and no light. And so you're developing the habit and the memory about these things. I take everything apart when I get it. I started doing that when I was 5 years old. Now, when I was 5, sometimes I didn't get some of it put back together, much to my parents' chagrin. But I like to take things apart, see how they work, but I also know how to fix them, repair them if I need to. So there's a class, a tools class 8220, which is about your lanterns, lamps, your camp stoves, how to maintain, care, and repair them. When we're talking about these camp stoves, I already mentioned that little generator, that tube that goes over top of that first burner. That's where the liquid fuel is being vaporized into a gas, because realize nothing burns until it's a gas. Solids have to get hot enough so that you now produce a gas that will burn. Liquids have to be vaporized so it's a gas and then it'll burn. And it's called a generator in these stoves and in the lanterns. They do wear out. They do clog up. And that's why, again, using the white gas, the naphtha, the lantern fuels, and stove fuels is better than gasoline. They will last longer. Nevertheless, you need to have spare parts, and you need to have spares for the spares. These little pump-up stoves like this, those pumps can fail. They wear out. They have to be maintained and oiled. Periodically, you'll have to replace the pump, the leather that's in there. So you want to be sure that you understand how to take them apart, know what the parts are in there, how to repair them, and if you have to, make parts. And I've had to make parts. Instead of the plastic that's molded in there, you can replace that with leather. Well, there's one of the things that goes in your supplies, is some split leather and things like that. Learn how to do that. I'll teach you those things in some of our future classes. So take them apart, be able to fix them, put them back together, both lanterns and lamps, the generators in particular. There's not a lot you can do to repair a generator. Once they become fouled, they actually burn out and burn through sometimes. So you just need spare parts for those. You maintain them best by using the proper fuel. Now, once again, as we talk about in the fuel class and in the lighting class, we have to be extremely careful about our safety. And that's why I wrote the words backwards. Extreme safety think, so that you'll kind of think about this. you learn the safety of these things and you're okay. You ignore it and you end up burning your house down and people along with it. And we have to consider this, that during the previous generations, there was a lot of experience with these things. The generations of fire safety and experience training that went on from children to parents and parents to children and grandparents and on, generation after generation, we are now very inexperienced with using these kinds of fuels and appliances. Things that were automatic for our grandparents and our great-grandparents. They lived with fire safety thinking every day, and they had enough accidents back then as it was. What that means is that now the consequences can be devastating very quickly, and we must be thinking about the safety, particularly with fire, and children. Children are the big offenders. Not that they want to be, they just don't know, they don't understand. It's no longer ingrained in our society the way that it was. So once again, back in that wellness area and in safety, it's about fire, and it's about having fire extinguishers and buckets of sand and water and whatever you have to do, and be practiced in how to respond to something quickly, because if it gets away from you, you could lose it all, literally. Once again, one of these safety areas is back on the ventilation. Fresh air is vitally important, that you have fresh air, even in something as you might think as open as this tent. This is a very large tent. It's an insulated tent that some friends of mine had, and they asked me to teach a class, and I said, I'll do it if I can teach it in your tent. So we went over to the Vernal area where they lived in this tent for 2 years out there. I learned a lot from them because I've never lived in a tent for 2 years, and here's some people that had. You'll notice that they have a wood-burning stove in there, and it's properly installed, and they have to pay attention to ventilation in here. You would never want to burn a white gas stove or appliance or lantern inside of a tent. And I will tell once again how important this is, because we had a dear family friend who was a backpacking buddy. He was an engineer that worked with my father, and when he retired, a little bit after my father had, he and his brother were out camping. He's very, very experienced. Winter camping, summer camping, primitive camping, and all those things. And he had been retired a little while. He and his brother were in a large cabin tent, not a little tiny tent, a large cabin tent, and they were reading. They were just having a good time into the evening. They fell asleep with their white gas lantern on, and they didn't wake up. Carbon monoxide got them, and you would think in a tent, certainly it wouldn't be that hazardous. It is hazardous. White gas stoves and lanterns should only be used outside, never inside of any structure. And of course, if you're in a highly sealed up container, such as this underground shelter, that's when you have to be extremely careful of everything that you may in fact be burning in there. You want to limit the amount of burning and be sure that you pay very close attention to ventilation. Air is vital for your safety and for your well-being. So if you think about it, the loss of utility infrastructure that we would use for cooking will not be a threat to you if you have done these things. Number one, you have knowledge of your options. Remember, K equals I times E. Knowledge equals information multiplied by experience. Just reading a book, listening to a seminar, watching a video is not enough. You need to play with this stuff. You need to do it now. You have knowledge of proper equipment, about its operation and maintenance. Here again, it's about knowledge, which is gaining experience with them. You don't just pack things away and say, well, when the time comes, I'll have it and I know I've got it. You need to know that you can do these things now. You have to practice conserving fuel and power now. It needs to be a habit, because if you're sloppy about that, when things get tough and when you're under a lot of stress, you're going to be worse than you are right now. You need to be part of a community. Community is what's vital for survival in any of these areas, is really what it comes down to. And you also have to know how to scavenge fuels, different kinds of fuels, for your appliances. As time goes on and things may become more scarce, you may find that you can locate a lot of things that have been abandoned if you know how to properly salvage them and then, I'll say, filter them for liquid fuels. Filtering will be very important, and how to dry them so there's no water in them. Then you would be able to use them. And it would be nice to be able to produce a little bit of electricity. We're not trying to maintain a lifestyle but some electricity is extremely valuable for lighting and running some small appliances and tools. And then you need to practice with your survival cooking all the time, regularly. Play with different appliances, different tools, different pots, pans, cooking methods, and again, about both the safety and how to properly handle these things. What's been very interesting, even though I'm more experienced than a lot of people, since I've been doing more and more cooking in my little survival practice kitchen down there, I've burned myself. Not real bad, but I make mistakes because of the habits, the way things run right now. You know, handles aren't hot on most of our pots. Well, on those pots, by golly, they get hot. And, you know, you just do some things without thinking, and so a little bit of pain right now will help save you from picking something up and then dropping it and spilling it later on. So the practice is useful. I'm not burning myself as much now as I did because I've been doing a lot of practicing as of late. And then you have to develop this habit of extreme safety think all the time, looking for where the hazards are, how to eliminate them. So this tools class, 8101, there's where it is in the list of the tools class, right up there close to the top, grid down cooking, fits into this overall curriculum. There's a lot of learning opportunities. If within the classes that we have scheduled that have been taught, being taught, and will be taught, there's 191 classes, and you go like, oh my heck, do I have to learn all of that, do all that, know all that, have all that? In reality, you cannot. That's why community is critical, because no one person can know it all, do it all, or have it all. I don't, and I don't believe anybody else can. So we work together cooperative, and that's where this class that will be coming up again in the future, class 1106, is. We're in this together. And survival is about outreach, cooperation, and about developing community. And how do you do that? How do you develop the right community? Some communities can be dangerous. Others will save your life. Well, as always, will you live providently? Since we all have the choice whether we're going to do that or not, if you'll make provisions in each area of your life, the bottom line is you can face the future with hope, with confidence. It does not have to be fear and trepidation. It's just like another phase of living. Because the truth about life is this: there's no doubt that tomorrow will come, and there's no dispute that things happen. But how you're prepared to meet tomorrow will make all the difference in the world. If you're prepared for the worst, then no matter what happens, it will be an adventure. So preparedness is not based on just having a bunch of stuff, things that I've talked about here. It's not just lists of things to buy and things that you have tucked away. What's inside of your head and your heart is far more important than the things that you own. Now, by the way, you need ownership of things too, but it's the knowledge, the skill, and the practice that you have. So the big part of this is making it a lifestyle, and that's where you test and try and play and have fun and make mistakes, break things. All of these things is a part of the fun of the adventure, but you're gaining the experience as you experiment with things, and you literally want to have it a part of your lifestyle, but we be sure that we're always doing it for the positive reasons. So it's a part of my play. It's my hobby. This may be a profession, but it's also my hobby, where I go and who I go with and how I choose and when and where to play. So as always, my interest and our interest is to reach and teach as many people as we can about some of these key aspects of provident living. So each and every week there are free classes that are available. Over the internet, if you'll go to safeharboralliance.com, under the radio shows, you open that up, there will be a link in there. You also get these through the newsletter, and we have these Tuesday night programs that we produce that you can listen to. They'll also be in our archives. If you can't attend on Tuesday nights, the program that we did will be up for approximately 2 weeks, and then it goes into the archives. We have the video cast every Wednesday evening, the people that are here attending with us. So you can, of course, come here live at Cabela's and participate also. These go into the archives. They'll be available. And as I mentioned, we have this free public video archive. When you go to the video cast or the webcast, open that up, go to past programs. There's 9 of them for each one of these areas of the overview, if you will, the opening series to each one of them. It's the 1000 series for all of these classes that are there. And we have our free newsletter that will keep you apprised of the different things that are coming up and will be coming up. Let me see what we have, if there's any questions here. The butane in a can for the tabletop stove, how cold can it be and will they still work? Butane will run at a little lower temperature than propane will. But keep in mind, one of the problems you have with the gaseous fuels is they have to boil off in that container, so they're absorbing heat. Butane will run down to about 30 below zero when you have a large a large tank, such as outside. We used to have when I was growing up, a butane tank. It wasn't propane, it was butane back then. Was used more than propane, and it would run well below zero. Your propane tanks, they start to get a little cranky when the temperatures get down around the 20 and 30 below zero, and it stays there very long. Now, typically during the day, it'll warm up enough, and they'll pick up some heat, and you have a large amount of mass there. But those fuels really stop working at 40 below zero. You're going to get nothing out of them. So if you have one of those little bottles inside of I'll say a somewhat heated house, your house is above zero, those little stoves will work. Now, they slow down because as the fuel is boiling out of there, it's absorbing heat from the surroundings. It's making that container get cold. And so they will be chilling, and you'll notice that the heat output production will go down as you use the stove. But here again, it's close to a hot pot and those things, so it would probably continue to work inside of a house. Don't take them snow camping, is the bottom line. They're not really good for that. Yes?
That little green butane stove, that's what I have in our big 72-hour kit. You're saying that's not good for winter?
The little propane green bottles?
No, the green stove with the little butane.
Yeah. Well,
butane bottle.
Gaseous, when it gets cold enough, all those gaseous fuels will stop working. So when by the time the temperatures are down well below zero, they will not work. You have to keep them warm. Relatively warm.
You take the bottle out and carry
sure.
it in your coat, right?
That's right. You could warm the bottle up, but realize when you take it back out into the environment, in the cold environment, it's going to be pulling what heat is there out of the environment to boil the fluid the liquid in there, and so it's going to be getting cold again. And so they get a little problematic when you have them out there at temperatures below zero. They just don't like working very well.
Yeah. I would imagine they designed the stove to siphon off or to allow some of that heat to go to the bottle.
The cheap ones, no, they don't. There are some better quality ones that do have a little heater plate in there that pulls heat over to the bottle to kind of warm it. But the inexpensive ones that most people have, no, they don't. Now, the fact that it's close to that flame, it's going to be picking up some heat. So it'll depend on where you're using it. If you're in a very cold environment, they will just simply peter out on you, is the bottom line. I see people come to some of our snow camps. They'll bring along a propane lantern out there, and they'll try to light that thing up, and it'll run for a few minutes, and then it just fades down to where there's almost nothing there because it's just too cold out there, and there isn't enough heat to keep boiling that propane off. And so propane and butane do not work as well. Large propane tanks outside have a lot of thermal mass in them, and so they will work better, and then usually during the daytime they will heat up. They pick up some heat, and they kind of store it as you go into the evening. Do you have a fuels comparison chart? I do in the fuels class. We do that. We talk specifically about fuels. You just keep in mind you have three primary categories of fuels. You have liquid, gaseous, and you have the solid fuels. And then with each one of those, in the liquid fuels, you have the kerosene, safe to use inside. You have alcohol, safe to use inside. Comparatively speaking, any of your gasoline-based, whether it's stove fuel, lantern fuel, or motor fuel, never inside. They're always for outside. And I also have comparisons of BTUs and different things like that on them. Your solid fuels have to be vented, so if you're talking charcoal, that's only outside. Or you could use charcoal in a fireplace or in a vented stove or something like that would be okay. But the worst offender for carbon monoxide is charcoal. Monstrous amounts of carbon monoxide. Second to that is the gasoline stoves. They put out huge amounts of carbon monoxide. That's why a dear family friend, how he lost his life, was to carbon monoxide in a tent. So you have to be very, very careful with those fuels. And the solid fuels, the primary ones, biomass, all the different things of wood, sticks, twigs, pine cones, pine needles, corn cobs, and any of those things, you have the right kind of a device, you can use them. And then coal, which is really stinky, nasty stuff, wants to be vented, but there's a lot of energy in it. It'll do a good job if you have the right kind of device. And then the gaseous area, the primary one is propane, the most common. Butane is secondary, and others are very minor fuels. Those are our main fuels that we use. I saw a hand here. Question?
I noticed you had the regular, the original volcano stove. Have you looked at the collapsible one?
The new one. I like my old original one. For one thing, it's more durable, and I'm not interested in using it for propane. They have a propane burner that goes in there. I have more efficient propane stoves than that. Yeah. So I like the original volcano because there's very little to break and jam and what have you, so I prefer it. The new ones, I guess, would be okay too. I fussed with it, and it was more fussing than I liked, so I just have the old-fashioned one. Works very well. And it's kind of built like an anvil too, so it's really tough. Have used it. I've had that since probably 1980, whatever the heck, when they first came out.
Do you use solid wood? Do you use wood in that or not?
I've used wood in it. I primarily have used the charcoal briquettes in it, or I make some of my own charcoal. It's not as smoky when you're running briquettes versus when you're trying to burn wood. But you know, if you run out of charcoal briquettes, you just burn wood. You burn what you've got, is what it comes down to. And that's why you want to have a variety of these. Now, what I will use over my volcano now is that little rocket stove, that green rocket stove. It's easier to work with, and it's more efficient.
So those are about $50 or $60?
Well, they 109, 102 right in there is where it is, and then if you want the deluxe model, I think it's 125 is where it is now. Yeah, I did buy mine for 30, but they've modified them. It's actually a little better. It's a little more durable, and it's a little nicer finish on it, but the price went up.
And they're heavy too, right? Relatively.
It's no heavier than the. It's probably about the same weight as the volcano stove that has the windshield with it.
Oh,
yes.
For scout activities, we've done the tuna fish cans with the cardboard and
the buddy burner, yes.
And with number 10 can is the stoves, and we have those in our 70-yard.
Yeah, you can make the little the cardboard and wax kinds of things. There's a lot of little things that you can do. You know, they have a tendency to be a little sooty and a little dirty and things like that, but they work. Unfortunately, wax has gotten to be rather expensive unless you buy it the way I buy it. I go to all the garage sales and I buy all the crooked candles, you know, that you buy for a quarter, that it costs you $10 downtown. You know, you get them for 50 cents and things like that, and melt them down, make a new candle. So that's the way I buy my wax. Versus buying it new, because it's getting to be fairly expensive.
$4 to $5 for a pound of regular paraffin.
Yeah, yeah. It used to be, you know, 25, 30 cents a pound. Now it's $5, $6 a pound for a paraffin. So, you know, buy used candles, old candles, is what I do, and you can melt it and then strain it to get the, you know, the lumps and chunks and charcoal out of it, and put new wicks in it, make new candles, or use it, you know, in different things like that. I save my wax primarily for candles, is what I use them for, because candles are a very nice thing to have. A little light in the dark is great. Just be sure you handle them carefully. Well, we'll close down for the evening, and we'll look forward to seeing folks next week online, in person, Tuesdays, Saturdays, Wednesdays, with a variety of classes we have. So have yourself a great evening. This is Jim Phillips, and I will see you next week. Good night.